Cool. Sloppy Joes making their way out there. All right.
Sloppy Joe. You ever heard that song?
No, I have
Adam
not.
Sandler did it. Yeah.
I love a good Sloppy Joe. I'm thinking a lot. Uh, so,
Is that how we're starting off?
yeah, we're going to start off with
Little
Sloppy
Sloppy
Joe.
Joes.
That
Yeah.
works for me. Two youth pastors.
Yes. Sloppy Joe.
Rapping about Sloppy Joes. So we got Korey with K here. We're coming to you live from the Timberlake Retreat Center in Millport, Alabama.
Yes, sir.
We are here for our joint D now with First Baptist. Korey is our keynote speaker for the weekend, so we were excited to have you bring the word. It's
Glad to
been
be here.
great so far. So I guess did we tell everybody maybe that does not know you, like most people do, but most people in the world know Korey with a K. He is world famous in Brazil and Africa and France, like he mentioned this morning. But
No.
tell the people who you are.
My name's Korey Cowart. I am originally from Fayette, Alabama. Went to Fayette County High School, graduated in 2009. And then started serving in youth ministry back in 2012, Gordo High School, in Gordo, Alabama, and then served in Florence, Alabama, and then served in Huntsville, and now I'm currently in Coleman, serving there, and just doing ministry. Also going to grad school, and then I'm the BCM guy at Wallace State Community College. So, kind of doing all that right now. Engaged to a very lovely lady, and we are getting married in November. And we run an Instagram account called Bookshelves for Believers that highlights Christian books and just helps people find things to read. So, yeah.
It's helped me find things to read.
Good,
I have
good.
I have
Yeah.
enjoyed the channel a lot. What was kind of the inspiration behind that? Is that something like it was Abigail's idea, or was it your idea?
It was actually her idea. So I had been thinking about back then, maybe with her starting a channel on like books or something like that, but I never said that. I kind of just thought that in my head, and then she just randomly one night was like, "Hey, what would you think about starting an Instagram or like something, a Facebook or something where we promoted books?" And I was like, "Yeah, I love that." And I actually didn't tell her about the thing I was thinking about, but
Yeah.
so she's gonna hear it now. But anyway, so
You heard it here first. It was
you heard it here.
Korey's idea.
It was, no, it was not. And so anyway, I was like, I love that, and she's really good with creating things, and so it was mainly her idea to answer the question. I just kind of agreed and affirmed and signed off and all that. So yeah. And what was the inspiration? Is that what you said? Yeah, we just wanted to. We love Christian books and we love reading them. Since seminary, that's kind of calmed down a little bit, but reading a lot of Christian books, think that they've been really instrumental in my Christian life and helping me to grow. And so she's the same way. We both love that. That's something that when we first started dating, we were like, I love books, you love books. And that's just a big part of our life. And I spend a lot of money on books, and I really love them, and she does too. So it's just kind of like a passion thing. Like we love it. But also, like we had a lot of people that would ask us, "Hey, what do you recommend we read?" Or I need something for prayer. I need something for this. And so then we were just like, well, let's try to put it out there. Like let's make it kind of widespread where we can recommend and encourage that way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I've never seen a negative review on Bookshelves for Believers, I guess. I don't know that y'all have one out there. Is there one out there?
There's not yet. That is something we have discussed.
I just heard you mention one of Rob Bell's books today. I could see getting a negative review on Bookshelves for Believers.
I think I said it first. We tossed around the idea of one day, and we're probably going to do this one day, of maybe doing books we do not recommend. And maybe the Rob Bell book would definitely be one of those. I don't know if that would make it to the post, but
would you do that just because you just enjoy being negative and blasting people?
Absolutely, yeah. Because I want to talk down. I'm sitting on my high horse. I need some sugar cubes for the high horse I sit on. But anyway, no, we're going to do that eventually. The thing that I'm kind of worried about, well, obviously we'll get some people that are like, that's not right, but we're okay with that.
Yeah.
The other thing though, I'm worried about, we have to frame it right, because if somebody gets on the account, how Instagram will rotate pictures and they see that Rob Bell book, and they're like, oh, are they promoting this now? And they don't read, it's like, so we got to go about that kind of carefully. So anyway, yeah. Yeah, there will definitely be some though eventually. I think.
So Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of, I wouldn't say books, per se, like in student ministry, just in my context, like most of the people I deal with are like teenagers, and
Right.
I don't know how many of them are picking up Christian books seriously, like more like towards the college ministry age,
Yeah,
like they start
for
to
sure.
really pick up on that. But I will definitely see like reels, I get sent reels, and I'm like, look at this is so awesome, and I'm like, it's kind of not,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know,
Yeah, yeah. You got to be careful what is out there because just because it's on social media, like that doesn't make it okay. And just
yeah.
there's a lot of people that they've got thousands of followers or thousands of shares on like a TikTok that was horrible, like
Hmm.
biblically,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, it's got 1,000 views, so it must, because you can say anything on social media and somebody's gonna be like, yeah, that's yay, woo, great.
Applaud
So
you.
you got to be careful with that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that have the label Christian that
Or
aren't
yeah,
very
exactly.
Christian.
You're right. Yeah.
On a more positive note, I guess like just thinking with bookshelves of believers, or bookshelves for believers,
For believers.
are there any books that you would say like do you have like a Mount Rushmore or like do you have a number one like this is my favorite book?
Yeah. It's kind of changed over the years, but I always go back. The one to me that has just really kind of set me on a path was Spiritual Disciplines for the Christian Life by Donald Whitney. That is like
Mm,
the book to me. He goes through all the disciplines. He goes through Bible reading. He goes through prayer, evangelism, fasting, and his whole thing is like he says in each chapter is like it's evangelism for the purpose of godliness, fasting for the purpose of godliness, and it's just so good. I actually had the class with Donald Whitney. I had the guy for
oh
one
wow,
of my classes, and it was called Spiritual Discipline.
is he at Southern?
He actually just went to Midwestern like a few weeks ago. He
Gotcha.
transferred. I don't know how that works with professors, but anyway, so yeah, I had him. I actually met him last year. I'm
Wow.
at Southern Baptist Convention. I mean, he didn't know who I was. He's got so many students, he didn't remember me, but yeah, I got to meet him. And actually, I've kind of got a funny story actually about when I had him in class. So I read the Spiritual Disciplines like in 2015. I was like, this is crazy. This is insane. Like, I
Mm,
love this book.
yeah.
And, obviously 2021, 2022, I'm still reading it. I recommend it. I give copies out. I've done studies with college students on it. So, like, I love this book and I'm
Mm.
all in it. So finally, and when I got signed up for his class, I didn't do that. I got put in that class. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to have the class with the man that, like, wrote the book. I love my favorite book.
Yeah.
So there's a thing in there talking about praying the Psalms, which is a really good practice. I'm not going to get super deep into it here, but anyway, there's like a process on how you do it.
Yeah.
We were supposed to watch a lecture on it. I did not get to watch the lecture on it before the class. The first day of class that I meet Donald Whitney with like 40 people on a Zoom call in this thing, he sees me and he made a joke and I laughed at his joke and he was like, I see Korey Cowart laughing at my joke. Thank you. So from there, he goes, all right, to start off class, I need somebody to tell me what the Psalms of the day are. Well, I've not watched the lecture. It's in the book, and I remember it from a long time ago, but I could not think of what it was right then.
But
And
he
and
knows
he
your name now.
he does. He goes, well, since Korey Cowart was laughing at my joke earlier, and I really appreciate it. Korey, why don't you go ahead and tell Psalms of the day?
Oh no.
And I just went, I'm going to be honest. I do not know them. And he said, well, okay then. Well, somebody else went and somebody else came on. But I'm just like, I've always wanted to meet this guy.
Oh man.
Like, this book has been my favorite, and my first encounter with him
Oh man.
is a dud. Now, the next week I was ready. I was like, hey, let me say him. And so I made up. But anyway, that's something funny I always like to tell people. But anyway, that's the book for me.
I think I might have read that. So, is he a Quaker in background, or is this dude Southern Baptist?
I think he's Southern Baptist, yeah.
Okay, so I may be thinking about a different book. I think the book that I've read was written by a guy who has like he's like a Quaker,
Okay.
not like the oatmeal, but
Yeah,
like
of course,
the
yeah. Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But I don't know. The book I read on spiritual, I thought it was the same book. I don't know. We'd have to look it
There's a
up.
lot of books that say like spiritual disciplines or the
Yeah,
disciplines or something like that.
but
So
it's similar the way that you described it. Maybe I'm just
yeah,
totally in left
because
field. I'm
there's another
confused.
book called Habits of Grace by I always want to say Greg Mathis. That's a judge on TV. That's not him. David Mathis, and he takes a lot from Donald Whitney's spiritual disciplines, but it's different things. It's got like how you sleep, how you manage your time, like things like
Okay,
that.
yeah,
But he also does prayer and Bible reading and all that. So there's books out there like it. There's another one by this guy named Mason King, and it's called Spiritual Disciplines as well. I've got it, but I haven't read it yet. But I know that's another discipline book. Then there's also Disciplines of a Godly Man, which I highly recommend, by the way. There's a Disciplines of a Godly Woman. I've not read that one, so I'm sure it's good, but
Yeah.
haven't read it. So, but Disciplines of a Godly Man is by R. Kent Hughes, and it's awesome. It covers like family, fatherhood, like all those things, and Bible reading, prayer, friendship, time management, like all it's really good. So,
Love to read
um,
both.
but spiritual disciplines of the Christian life is like my number one now. If I had to do a Mount Rushmore, that's an interesting term you said. I don't know what else exactly. There's just so many. I will say Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland.
That's a good.
That's an incredible one. Read it back in 2020 when it first came out. Just so good. Chapters are short, but it's still deep enough. I used to use it as like a devotional because we read it in 2020 when we were shut down.
Mm,
And so I was just at home and I would read like a chapter a day, and it was just a really good time. I
yeah.
will say this: if you read that book, though, I wouldn't read it in a group setting. Without there, he's made like a study guide or a small group kind of guide. Back then there wasn't one, and we just read a chapter a week and then discussed it. It's kind of a hard book to discuss as a group, but that study
It's more
guide,
personal in
yes, yeah,
nature.
it's more
Yeah.
personal
Yeah. For
devotion
sure.
because it'll talk about God, and then you're like, well, what does that? What does that do for you? And you're like, well, I just think God's good now. And then that's kind of what everybody else says, and you're like, well, "This is great, yeah."
Yeah.
So that's a good one. And then he actually has another book that I actually might think is better than Gentle and Lowly called Deeper.
I
Um,
have not read.
that is an incredible book. It's not as long as Gentle and Lowly, but it's amazing. I really like that book. And then just to go, I guess four here. I would probably say, oh, actually, that's kind of hard to think about a fourth one. I'd probably say Knowing God by J.I. Packer. That's a deep one. It's kind of hard to read, but that's an incredible
Yeah.
book as well.
I've
So
pieced through that one. I haven't
yeah,
finished it,
it's
but
it's a little bit hard to read. He's a little harder
mm,
to read, but yeah, I guess that'd be my Mount Rushmore maybe.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty solid.
yeah. So
I don't know that I would have a Mount Rushmore per se. Like I could, like, there's been. I don't even know if I could start on
yeah,
trying to come up with that. But like I really like Lewis a lot. Like Mere Christianity to me was
great,
like
great.
a
Yeah,
big one. Um, and I really like Piper a lot. Like
mm-hmm,
Don't Waste Your Life was. I feel like I read that at the right time, like
yeah,
really young,
mm-hmm,
kind of thinking through ministry. Like those are two that really just
mm-hmm.
I feel like I go back to and always piece through. I like the Lord of the Rings books too,
I've read those. Those are really good.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you a book I read that I am not recommending by any means. I read this when I was lost. Um, I just read this because I was bored one summer, and so I read it. I read It by Stephen King.
Yeah.
And it was actually a really, really good book. It's got some really bad things in it, so again, I'm not
Yeah.
recommending it, but just it was like 2,000 pages, and like it was pretty good. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I don't even know if I should have mentioned that, but yeah, we're here.
It's you don't be you're not only
Oh,
reading and only
only Christian.
listening
Yeah,
to Christian stuff and only watching Christian
I
TV.
float out of bed and the Bible comes to me, so I do that. But then
You
after
just
that,
have your guardian angel
yes, yeah,
delivers it to you. Yeah.
yeah. I think though. I don't read a lot of books besides Christian books exactly, but I did read this book by, well, it left me now, the Navy SEAL,
Jocko Willing.
him, yeah, Extreme Ownership.
Yeah, that's good. I had it as an audio
That's a
book.
good
I've
book.
listened to.
That's a good book. Yeah, it talks about leadership. That's a good one. That wouldn't be the first one I'd recommend on leadership, but it's good.
He's got a book called Discipline Equals Freedom. That it's just like a little short book. It's almost
Yeah,
like a pamphlet, and it's sort of like really well. It's like marketed to guys. Like I mean, the pages are
right.
black. And
Yeah,
it's all black and white.
yeah,
It's cool, but I keep it in my office. I've worked through some of that.
right,
But like I mean, it's practical advice. I think it's applicable. You just got to take it
mm,
through the biblical worldview. But
right.
uh, I was about to ask something. I forgot what I was going to ask. Um, what are some like so? In what ways do you incorporate Christian books into your like daily walk with God? Like I mean, because you read a Christian book different than you read the Word.
Right.
You got to give that
Hmm.
priority.
Right.
But
Yes.
then you also have like seminary, like you're reading academically, like for the seminary setting is
Yeah.
different. So how do you like kind of balance that? I guess.
So I would say, as you said, the word comes first. Always that is the first thing I read. That always I try to read that the most and try to spend the most time in it. Unfortunately, that does not happen like I want it to all the time,
Yeah.
but I try to make that a priority. And then as far as supplemental books, what I'll do, a lot of times what I'll do, I'll read my Bible first, spend time there, pray, things like that, and then I may like bring that one over. Read a chapter depending on how long they are or something, and then also kind of maybe sometimes they line up, and that is beautiful. That doesn't always happen.
Mm.
Then I kind of pray through that. I let that kind of work on me. Seminary is just a pure like I like a lot of the books I read, but it's like I have to read this for an assignment.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because they're academic books, they're not really like soul books, and they're not meant to be, and that's fine. Like you read the history of this, and like you learn from it, but it
Yeah.
doesn't like like to pray through it. It's like, hey, I just read about Martin Luther. God help me to be like Martin Luther, but like, what are you saying there when you say like? So that may not be the best thing to do, but you
Yeah.
just kind of learn. So I would say the first two are kind of more devotional prayer. I would say the word is definitely the foundation. That's the one that guides all of it, and then I'll say something. I keep saying supplemental book. That's just kind of like to kind of add more to what you've already gotten. And then seminary, it's helpful, but for me now, maybe I will read some books that do some more soul work. When I get into some more theology type stuff. But right now it's like history, Christian, survey, New Testament, things like that. So I just kind of keep that
Yeah.
separate. And then I will say, I've said this before, but that does, you read all these books for seminary, like, it kind of, when you go to pick up that other book, it's like, oh, I don't want to read another book right now. Like,
Yeah.
what in the
Yeah.
heck? So, and that's been a challenge for me, like, personally. Like, I love reading, but seminary has really, like, I mean, Abigail will tell you, like, it's kind of, what am I trying to say? It's kind of, peeled back some of my personal reading. Like I don't read as much as I used to now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take the summer off, so hopefully I can get back into that. But anyway, I would say that's probably the balance that I
Yeah.
strike. I don't know if that's best for everybody, but that's kind of how I do it. So
As a pastor and somebody who's doing ministry and you're preaching once a week, twice a week,
that's week.
once a week, like how do you? So like this is something that I learned from Shane Pruitt, but it's something that I have like really done for years. It's like you teach and preach and you do ministry out of the overflow from your walk with God. And
Right.
so if you're reading, like Gentle and Lowly, or if you're reading like Don't Waste Your Life, or you're reading a book on spiritual discipline, like does your teaching reflect more spiritual discipline type stuff, or do you read like how do you manage that? Like, because if you're doing ministry from a place of overflow and that's what you're taking in,
Yeah.
how do you take that and give it back as well?
Well, I think for one, it depends on what I'm preaching. Okay, so like right now in our youth group, we're preaching through Philippians. We're walking through the whole book. Um, and I'm reading in my personal time. I'm reading Anxious for Nothing by John MacArthur. There's another book called Anxious for Nothing. It's not that. This one's by John MacArthur. That one's about anxiety. Um, and honestly, I don't want to sound arrogant when I say this. Anxiety's not been a huge struggle for me over my life. I mean, I've had times where it has
Sure.
been, but
Yeah.
just like for some people, it's a huge struggle.
Mm.
And so that one has been a little bit harder because I read it and I'm like, okay, this is not hitting me personally, but there are several people I know in our youth group
Mm.
that are dealing with
Yeah.
this, and so that may not come out in my preaching exactly right now. That specific topic. Now, I will say we just finished, or we're about to finish Philippians 3. We're going to get into Philippians 4 in a couple weeks, and that's when you get into all the contentment and all that. So then
Yeah. Yeah.
that may overlap there, but I think it may not come through in preaching all the time, but I think the way you minister and like it can just um, me reading about anxiety when I don't struggle with it really, it kind of gives me like, oh, this is what they deal with. This is like
Yeah.
that the girl that talked to me about a few weeks ago, like that's what she's going through,
Mm.
and I didn't understand that, but now I do, and now I can kind of help. I can kind of maybe frame my questions or my counsel or something like that, a little bit better to where she understands it, and I think when it's like discipline stuff, I think that just kind of is. I mean, you said it perfectly. Like it kind of overflows. It's like I'm going to try to teach. Let's take prayer for example. I'm going to try to teach my students how to pray how I've learned to pray.
Hmm.
Now you need to preface that with like, we're not saying this is the only way to pray and this
Yeah,
is it,
exactly. Yeah.
but like here's a helpful way that I've learned, and I just want to give that to you guys as well. And I just think it comes out in the daily, and then I think going back to I said a second ago, but I think it's more personal things because like you'll have a kid, you know, you have somebody come up and they're like, "How I'm struggling reading my Bible. How do I do that?" Well, in spiritual disciplines, he gives these ways that you could read the Bible. So maybe one of these, you know, so it's kind of,
Yeah.
I think it manifests itself more in the counseling part of it. The preaching, I think it's just gonna overflow depending on what you're reading, what you've read, and what you're
Yeah.
talking about, what you're preaching. There's sometimes where it lines up perfect, you know. Again, where what you're preaching is applicable to what you're reading, and
Hmm.
you can kind of say, "Hey, Kevin DeYoung said this, and I'm reading this right now, so
Yeah.
here, you know."
So
So
do you think that, like, so when you Philippians 4 and it talks about contentment, like, do you think that you would be, and you kind of hit on this, I just want to clarify, like, do you think you're more likely to, get into anxiety because it's something that's fresh on your mind because you just read that John MacArthur book, than like you somebody who doesn't ever like for me, like, I'm worried that I'm just like kind of in my own personal echo chamber, not that like I'm not
yeah,
spiritually led like by what I'm saying, but
right,
like that's not something I struggle with either.
yeah.
So when I'm talking about contentment, like I'm probably thinking more like my struggle with contentment is not that.
Yeah, yeah. I would say I think it's
It gives you the ability to diversify.
that's yeah. Like I'm the same way. When I read the contentment thing, I see it a different way. And especially when he starts saying like, I know what it's like to have nothing. I know what it's like to
Mm,
have plenty. I see that maybe a different way than somebody that is struggling with anxiety. I don't think either one of us necessarily see it wrong. It's just it hits a different
hmm.
nerve. It strikes a different chord, and so I think what you're reading, to kind of answer what you said, what you're reading will impact what you're, what is going to come out. So like if you're reading about if you're reading about theology of hell or something, and then
Yeah,
there comes
yeah,
up a passage about hell, you're like, oh, well, let me tell you, here we go. Let me tell you what I've been reading, and I think sometimes that can be kind of a negative thing,
yeah.
because what I don't like and what I used to do, what I used to be really bad about doing when I was younger, and I'm sure I still do this at times, but somebody will say something on a topic, and then I think like, oh, well, you don't know you ain't read what I've read. You ain't
Right.
read what Vodi Bakum said about
Yeah.
this, and let me, you don't know that. So if I tell you that, and it's like I automatically am like, well, what I know is better. Now
Mm,
I will agree. I think it's okay to think sometimes that somebody's not looking at something in the right way. You
yeah.
know,
Sure.
somebody says Jesus did not die on the cross,
Right.
and I'm thinking, well, I don't agree with that's not right. I think it's okay to kind of maybe have that thought, but I
Yeah.
think you can get in a really dangerous spot if you think, well, that pastor don't know anything because he hadn't read the
Mm,
latest book that I've read, and
yeah.
the latest and greatest. So yeah, I think it just kind of depends on how you let it kind of flow out. You can see whatever you want to see, obviously, right? Like when you read it, like if you want to just see the anxiety part, you'll see that. You want to see contentment, you'll see that.
Yeah.
But I think when you read those books, there is the, oh, well, hey, I've read about that, so let me talk about that. But I
Mm,
think there's a balance where you got to be careful
yeah.
that you don't, hey, I know everything there is to know about this subject because John
Right.
MacArthur said it, and I know what he said.
Yeah,
So yeah,
especially the topic like anxiety that is the one that's stigmatized, and number two is like really trendy in today's
right,
world. And
yep,
there's a lot of like research, a lot of information
yeah,
out there, and you're gonna find some things that conflict.
mm-hmm,
And even in the Christian world, I'm sure there's probably two books on anxiety that say completely different things,
yeah,
and then those two books will probably say something completely different than a secular one will say,
yeah,
and you don't ever know what your students have heard, or I mean what they're really dealing with, like if they talk to a doctor or whatever, and
yeah,
like you can't, like, I don't ever want to sound arrogant like you, and also, but there's all like Dr. Whitman described in one of our systematic classes about like the curiosity of a theologian being a vice is like you're
mm-hmm,
just trying to chase like,
yep,
oh, I want to know all this information because
yep,
really what you're trying to do is puff your ego up,
yep,
and
exactly,
I know
yeah,
something you don't, or you know it's really like the whole purpose of it all
mm-hmm,
is the pursuit of God
right.
and the pursuit of holiness.
Yeah, I think like that's the thing we talk about it at Southern, like that they're, you know, you got to be careful with knowing all this because like you can actually be dangerous with all the information you know. I
Yeah.
say we talk about Southern. I've talked about one guy. I don't. That's not like a sweeping of the university or the seminary.
When you and Al Muller
Yeah,
go to
yeah,
coffee,
yeah,
like
yeah,
y'all
yeah,
just
yeah.
this is what y'all talk about.
Yeah, me and Dr. Schreiner sit down every no. I've talked with one guy about it, but anyway, yeah, like you can know so much to where it hurts you. Okay, because I mean, what did Paul say in the Bible? He said knowledge puffs up, just like you said.
Mm.
Like theology is a good thing. Like we need to know right theology, and we need to know it. All these people that say, I'm actually going to talk about this tonight. All these people that say, like, well, I don't care about all the theology. I just love Jesus. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you got to know theology to love Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, like you
Well,
got
what
to,
Jesus?
right? Yeah, you don't know Jesus, so that's not the path you want to take. But at the same time, if you're trying to be one of these, like you want to be able to sit at the table with, if he were still here, R.C. Sproul and like that, these people and have a
Mm.
good conversation and you not just quiet. Like if that's your goal, then yeah, I would, I would say it's not a good thing because we need to know God more. I mean, obviously, if we love God, we want to know Him more. Robbie Gallaty's got a really good graphic. It's a triangle. I think it's triangle, and it's got knowing at the top is the word knowing, obeying, and then loving. And he says the more, or maybe the other way, yeah, loving down here, obeying over here. He says the more you know God, there's an arrow. The more you know God, the more you love Him. The more you love Him, the more you obey Him.
Yeah.
You got to know God, and or just like anybody, if the more you get to know Him, the more you love Him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe the more you get to know Him, you may not love Him, but for the most part,
Yeah.
yeah, like and that helps things. And the same thing with God, like we've got to know the God that we
Mm.
we love. Like if we don't know anything about Him, I mean,
Right.
and that's again, I get the whole like, well, I don't get real tied down into all that doctrine and theology. I understand that can be a bad thing, but like we got to have it. Like
Yeah.
it's a thing, So
And that's definitely, I feel like that's all attention for a student pastor as well, because you're dealing with kids, and
yep.
kids are A, very impressionable, and
Mm.
B, stupid. So I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
that every 16-year-old is stupid, but like you gotta balance like the whole,
Mm.
like you want to disciple them up, but at the same time, like you gotta hit the things that are important.
Yeah.
But you don't want to just create a bunch of puffed up kids that
Right.
just
Yeah.
think they're smarter than everybody else,
Exactly.
or like we want to teach apologetics, like
Yeah.
the purpose, like you've hit some apologetic topics, but it's not because we want to train our kids to go argue
Yeah. Right.
on the
Yeah.
lunch table.
Yeah.
We just want them to be informed whenever
Right.
those conversations do happen.
Yeah.
But seasoned with salt.
Yeah.
Uh,
The way I've heard it is apologetic type conversations. They're meant more for defense than offense,
mm-hmm.
and that's the thing. And that's hopefully that's what I've been kind of communicating is like not to go around and be like, hey, who wants some, right? Like talk to me about the Bible.
Yeah,
Let's see what you got.
exactly.
But it's more like hey, if somebody were to challenge you on this, you got a base,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of work from, and I think that's super important. I do think again, there can be a balance to where you can teach theology to students, but not go way overboard. I mean, I'm probably not. I'll admit this. I don't know if anybody sees this. I may not like this. I'm probably not going to get super deep into Revelation with my youth group. That's just probably not going to happen. Now we're studying Revelation at our church on Sunday mornings, so the pastor's doing that, so we're getting that kind of already. But
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to do that. And anyway, but I think there's a balance there because like what gets on my nerves is we think a lot of times like students can't handle theology. They can't handle deep things when they're out here busting out calculus and
Yeah.
third chemistry and all
Yep.
like stuff I never touched in high school at all, and they're out here like super basic,
Exactly.
but they can't handle like we got to water down the Bible teaching so much
Mm.
that
There
that
you go.
it's like, hey, do you kids know who Jesus is?
Mm.
Okay, good. Well, it's yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of mine they're at Bevel, and
mm,
they're taking college courses in 10th, 11th
right,
grade, 10th
yeah,
grade, 11th grade, 10th grade. So
yeah,
I mean, if you can take a collegiate level literature class, well, you can read the Bible at
exactly,
a higher level,
exactly,
you know.
yeah.
And so I don't know.
And I mean, I think we that's our fault. Sometimes we baby them.
Yeah,
Sometimes like we
absolutely.
think they can. And I get it. There's some people that come along. They need it a little bit slower. They can't handle as much. I get that. But for the most part, I think
Yeah.
We try to water it down. We try to not. We don't give them enough credit. And honestly, that's kind of insulting to the students, right? It's like, hey, y'all are not smart enough.
Yeah, I'll say they're stupid jokingly.
Yes.
Okay, they are immature in a
Yes.
lot of ways,
Yes.
but they are not so stupid that they cannot
Yes,
understand the
right.
Bible.
Yeah,
I was being
know.
facetious,
I knew what you
just to
meant.
clarify.
I forgot you even said that. I knew what you meant. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You meant stupid as in they do stupid things.
Yeah,
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 like make
yeah.
dumb decisions. Yeah, that's what I thought. But yeah, just they can handle it. I mean, I trust them, and there's a benefit for that. And when you do that, when you teach them those deep things, there's going to be some that they don't.
They'll
They're like,
check
yeah,
out.
they're like, hey, whatever. But it's the same thing if you teach them the other way, right? Like, there's something still going to check. I mean, you get up there and say Jesus died on the cross, and they're like, well, I don't. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Like, so I think there's a balance, and I think books play a big part of that. Like, I think
Yeah.
like we've got some. I got a student that she tears up some C.S. Lewis. She's read Mere Christianity, Screw Tape Letters, Great
Awesome.
Divorce, like just all of them, and like so you've got those out there, and I think those are good resources because there's books that are written for students, but they're not like A B C D E. Like it's not like that. It's like it's stuff they can handle. So
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good thing.
I got this quote from Oswald Chambers that I just shared it on Facebook. Two people liked it, but
like it.
yeah, it says the author who benefits you most is not the one who tells you something you did not know before, but the one who gives expression to the truth that has been dumbly struggling in you for utterance. And I feel like that's the I feel like students a lot of times, or even like me, like this. I think that's true for everybody, but
Yeah.
especially for students, like they're really starting to think through a lot of these things for the first time. If they find a book that's concise and somebody who's done the research and done like it's just so helpful to say this is what I've been kind of trying to articulate in my mind,
Right.
and really helpful moving forward. So I think look, we're about to miss our sloppy joes,
Oh,
but
snap.
yeah, it's about 6. I
All
didn't
right.
even realize what time it was until I pulled out my phone to check Facebook. But man, I really appreciate
Yeah,
you hopping on here, and I
for sure.
appreciate your wisdom and everything that you've done for us this weekend. It's been phenomenal. I'm excited to hear
Thanks
the
for
word
having me.
tonight. So I'm excited about the sloppy Joe. Honestly,
Uh,
are you a sloppy Joe fan?
I am.
Actually,
I am. I'm a sloppy Joe guy. The only thing is, we just had tacos earlier, and I don't know. I'm kind of,
I was planning on
you know.
getting about 2 sloppy Joes. I'm gonna play full court basketball.
Well, we did. I did that with tacos, and that you did too.
Did you
So
puke?
I did not puke.
I didn't.
No, no,
So I
we're
feel like
good.
that's a win.
Now my joints hate me because I'm old now
I'm
and
an
can't
expert in
run up and
that.
down a basketball court like I used to could. But
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so
All right. Well,
but yeah,
you pray for us, and then we'll get out of
yeah.
here.
I'll pray for you. God, thank you so much, Lord, for this time just to talk. God, just to discuss and to encourage. And Lord, we pray that you would just allow us to grow deeper in our walk with you, Lord, in whatever way that is, Lord. We talked about books on here, but God, there are many people out there that do not read books and they're solid Christians, and we know that. But God, I do pray for those that want to explore this avenue of it and kind of want to pick up more books and try to grow deeper in their walk that way. And I pray that you'll just put good books in their hands, and God, just allow them to just grow deeper in their walk with you, and not idolize those books, as we said, not put those books before the Bible, but just read them in the right way and read them in the right context. And God, I pray for anybody that may read this, or excuse me, may hear this, and Lord, that they'll just be encouraged by your word, and they'll be encouraged by you, and not anything we've said, but we pray that, Lord, it's just you speaking through us and encouraging people that'll see this. Thank you so much for all you do. In your name I pray. Amen.
Bookshelves for believers. Check it
Bookshelves
out.
for Believers on Instagram.
Yep.
Hit us up. All right.
That camera died, by the way.
Did it?
Oh,
Okay.
like,
I saw you looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was.
We'll just have to do it again. Tonight.
I wasn't recording on the mic either. So.
No, no.
I'm just kidding.